My name is Alvis. I'm a junior DevOps at Tech Labs. So I'm gonna create a four-part series of how Kubernetes have decided to ditch Docker and what are the other options available to us despite of ditching Docker. How is the future gonna look like? So I'm gonna cover everything in this four-part series. So stay tuned. So first, we're gonna talk about how and what happened to Docker in regards to Kubernetes. So, like most of us heard, Kubernetes is deprecating Docker as a runtime in favor of using container runtime interface. So, container runtime interface, I'll dive deeper later on, is just a interface between the containers and the Kubernetes and how Kubernetes can orchestrate through the CRI interface through the containers. So, first of all, is that a reason for you to panic because Docker has been ditched? Your whole entire architecture is built upon Docker. So do I have time to switch to another thing? All those questions, yeah. It's a deprecation, so obviously they will do it in a matter of years. So by the end of 2021, I believe the Docker is going to be completely be unsupported. So you still have time to switch to other things and develop your stack. So if even if you decide not to upgrade to a different stack because it's too much price intensive, uh, they'll still be updating all the security patches to the 1.22 version. So you guys have don't no worries about using the current stack and it'll be working for quite a long time. So you might have a lot of questions at this point right now. Like, is what is the replacement for Docker? Should I learn a new stack? Should I completely ditch Docker? I heard a thing called CRI-O, which has been coming very popular. Should I learn it? Should I implement it? Is that a replacement for Docker? So all that we'll dig into. So from the start, we'll start with container runtimes. What is a container runtime? When most people refer to container runtime, they think Docker. Docker brought containers to mainstream, no doubt about it. But it's become like a industry standard for the past 5 years. Everyone knows about Docker. Everyone knows about container and how useful it is. While it's still great, it leads to misconception that the only way to run container was with this one tool, Docker, and there's no other container platforms apart from Docker, which is not true at all because there's a lot of amazing container runtimes apart from Docker. So in context of Kubernetes, we most choose containers depending upon Kubernetes because Kubernetes originally leveraged Docker for running containers and it still does until today. So that was a problem with Kubernetes team because all these maintenance were dependent upon a external player called Docker. So what they decided to do was introduce a container runtime interface. As I've mentioned before, it's an interface which lies between the Docker and Kubernetes. So what does this container runtime interface does is just gives a middle layer between these both, and the other side of the container side, it can be Docker, it can be CRI-O, it can be containered, or any other container software which complies with policies. Um, so they have a particular OCI standard for all these CRI platforms. So you just have to, if a container follows the OCI, it is compatible with Kubernetes. So that's the main difference. It's been introduced for quite a long time now, but yeah, so that's the main difference. So what does OCI standard does is another question. So it has to run with uh, defaulting to run C, maintaining the container OCI image standards. There'll be a particular standard which OCI puts a image for. It has to follow that. And then the container networking should be set up in a way that external Kubernetes can orchestrate the entire container platforms. And plus, you have to have an image repository like Docker Hub or something similar to that. So that those are the OCI standards for CRI. So what does CRI-O mean? So CRI-O is a software which is almost trying to replace Docker right now. So CRI-O is basically a container runtime interface plus OCI standard followed. So that's where the letters come from, CRI minus O. So that's called CRI-O. So it's one of those many CRI-O is one of those many things you can choose from. There's CRI-O, there's CRI containered, Dockerism, or many more. So container is not defaultly compatible with Kubernetes. You have to use CRI container, only then it will be useful for you. Let's see how we're going to replace Docker with multiple different technologies. So as you know, Docker is a very UI focused in software where it is an individual software on its own apart from using it in a Kubernetes. All the developers use it to make development process easier. But when you come to DevOps side, we have to use a process which is not dependent upon another process that much. We could isolate each process alone. It'll be much better in building the pipeline faster and more efficient. So there's three softwares going to use for. First software would be CRI-O, Builder, Podman. So how does these three softwares come in play to replace Docker? As we already said, that CRI-O is a container runtime platform. So if you have an image, you want to run the thing, you use CRI-O. It just runs the container, does nothing more. So what is Builder? What does Builder come from? What does Podman come from? I'll explain each things individually. It is a lightweight OCI complaint container runtime designed specifically for Kubernetes. You can't use it without Kubernetes. It's just Kubernetes thing, which when they introduced CRI, they thought they'll have one more thing which supports it. It's a very lightweight. It's very wonderful for the life cycle. So what is Builder? So now we have a standard container runtime for Kubernetes to run applications across multiple infrastructures. You may have a quick question about how do I build a container image based on CRI-O, even Docker if you want to do that. The answer is Builder. So Builder is a OCI component again and daemonless tool for building and modifying Docker images. You don't have your you don't have to have your Docker running all the time in the background in order to create and build images. This is just a small software which quickly builds images based on Docker syntax. So what are the advantages of using Builder? It's a fine-grained control over commands and content of each image layer. Utilities from the containers host can optionally be leveraged as a part of the build. Build instruction can be passed in Docker file, sharing the underlying image and storage components with CRI-O. So what are the advantages of using Builder? It would be having you have a more fine-grained control over the commands and each layer of the image, unlike Docker. You can still do it in Docker. You have to like work around it, and you have another leverage part of building containers which can be optimally leveraged by the host, such as CRI-O. And you don't have to learn a new syntax for building images. You can just use the same old Docker file with same syntaxes almost, and underlying image and storage components of the image is completely shareable with CRI-O. Lastly, Podman. So Podman was first known as Kpod. It was very popular for Kubernetes pods. So Podman is basically the pod which refers to multiple containers running at the same time, like Kubernetes, where kubelets communicate with pods. The same pod comes here. So it's been around for the past 1 or 2 years. It's originally part of a CRI-O project. Then it was moved to a separate project under libpod, I believe. So they wanted to make their own. This product has wanted they wanted this product to be they wanted this product to have its own leg. So they switched to Podman. It offers a very similar experience to Docker command line. All those non-orchestrated containers which run on individual containers, it's very similar. So what in addition it provides is it provides something like a pod from Kubernetes but outside Kubernetes. So it will be a major advantage to check your network IPC and PID processes what's running. And on top of all that, this is also a daemonless process, so you don't have to keep your application running in the background. The debugging is all OCI complainant. So the advantage of using is it's Docker compatible syntax. It solves the administrative gap with Kubernetes CRI. It has a wonderful remote API through Warlink. So those are all the advantages, and this is how you can replace the entire Kubernetes with anything other than Docker. These are only the small, very popular and very reliable softwares that I just mentioned. You can go with any other things which you think is going to be the future and go and go ahead and implement it. But I would recommend this. This has very good community support and all that. So in conclusion, so should you switch to the new tech stack? It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of effort. So CRI-O is basically just a runtime dedicated for Kubernetes apart from Docker. You can still go ahead and use Docker, but then it's going to be officially rolled out by end of 2021. So in those situations, I would prefer you to go and switch around the stack and try to at least implement other solutions because we have no idea what the future holds. So if you're going to do that, the only downside to all these is if you're using a Mac, you can't install CRI-O and test it out. You need a Ubuntu, Florida, or CentOS, or any other Linux-based software. So hopefully we have a updated version for a Mac. I don't think it's coming, but we'll hope for it. So should you switch? Should you not switch? It completely depends upon your size of the team and the size of the software that has been running. Try to switch like at least 50% by the end of 2021 so that we'll know if they're going to extend the support for Docker separately, or I don't think that's going to happen, but yeah, let's see what happens. So try to switch. That will be my recommendation, and I'll post a lot of other videos about how we can use CRI-O and how a hands-on tutorial on CRI-O, Podman, Builder. I'll show all the implementation, and maybe I'll show you all the pipelines, how to create a pipeline with all these tools. So that's it from my side. So if you have any doubts or questions, feel free to put it in comments, or you can reach me out in LinkedIn. My name is Alvaz F, and goodbye.